Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining on this Tuesday, noon, afternoon, late morning, whatever it may be for you. We'll get started here in just a moment. We'll kind of let some more file through here, but we want to be cognizant of everyone's time. So just give us another 20, 30 seconds, and then we'll kick it off. My name, some of you, I'm sure you've seen me on other webinars, maybe with a few of our partners, but my name is Matt Honeycutt. And I'm the account executive of partnership activation and experience with the NAIA. So I'm excited for you guys to be a part of this kind of workshop webinar with ZeeMee. So ZeeMee, they are a partner. They're a trusted service provider of student enrollment engagement. They do amazing things with bringing together community on these campuses and really having students understand how they fit and what the culture is like at maybe a school they're looking at or what they're wanting to join as a part of that school. So we, as the NAI, have our eligibility center using ZeeMee's community chat services and solutions, which has been amazing. We've been able to connect and kind of really figure out ways to help better give service to students on what they might need to know, all things eligibility. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Soup Campbell. He's the head of community experience with ZeeMee, and he's going to take it from there and kind of walk you through what they do, and you get to hear from some great people on how ZeeMee works. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Matt. And again, it's Harrison Campbell, but yes, if you're like, what are they what's Matt calling him? I'm one of those. I've been stuck with the nickname Soup my entire life, and apparently I'm never going to outgrow it. But before we dive in today, if everyone that's attending, love for you to jump into the chat, like introduce yourself. We want to get to know you all as well. Let us know kind of where you're from, what your role is. So please take a second to introduce yourself. Again, I'm Soup Campbell, head of community experience at ZeeMee. Also have three other amazing panelists today that we're going to talk through. So I want each of them to take a minute and introduce themselves. And so we can go Leah, Brittany, Jesse. Just jump in and introduce yourselves to everyone.
Perfect. Leah McCormack. I serve as the Vice President of Business Development and also oversee the Eligibility Center at the NAIA. So I'll be offering some perspective on the incoming class of student athletes and the use that we've been able to see of using ZeeMee for our Eligibility Center today.
Yeah, I'm Brittany Santagraw. I serve as the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management at Missouri Baptist University. Been here not going into my ninth year, served in a variety of admissions and admissions related roles over the last 15 years or so. So excited to be here today and chat with you guys.
Yes, my name is Jesse Harmeyer. I serve as the Director of Undergraduate Admissions here at Grace College. If you don't know where that's at, we're in the northeast quadrant of Indiana, yay Hoosier State. But I've been serving in the admissions field for about 5 years now, going into my 6th year. And I'll be bringing the perspective of kind of the non-traditional athlete to this webinar. So excited to dive in.
Awesome, awesome. And unless Leah, because I don't know this for sure, but unless Leah is doing any coaching work, like there's no coaches on the panel today. So go easy on us coaches out there if you're attending. Be nice to us today. So no, we're super excited for today's topic. And really where we're framing today's discussion around is how we can bridge the gap between our athletes, our non-athletes, and can we use community to do that? I think all of us on the panel do kind of have a background and perspective, a lens of seeing how this works kind of in the higher ed space. So we're just going to examine some areas, kind of discuss a few topics, and certainly those of you all that are watching, jump into the chat as well, be a part of the conversation with us. But again, just before we completely dive in, Matt did a good job giving a little bit of an overview. Again, I would assume most of you all have no idea what ZeeMee is. Just very basically, ZeeMee's this native mobile social community app that's kind of just exploded in popularity over the past few years. So I understand if you're like, I've never even heard of this thing, but it's kind of crazy. There's millions of students on now, thousands of prospective students, student athletes are installing the app every single day. And really, it's just because these students want to go through this shared process, this shared experience of kind of making that transition from high school to college. And so that's kind of what this thing is. And you'll learn maybe a little bit more about it today. But just wanted to kind of highlight that. So we know that these connections are really, really vital, right? And we know that community actually can start long before these students ever arrive on campus. I think that's a big difference today versus how this thing looked years ago, right? So a big part of this is how can we leverage community? How can we connect all these students together long before they arrive on campus? And what type of positive impact could that make for the students? Okay, so Leah, Brittany, Jesse all have various levels of experience using the ZeeMee app. So again, so to kick things off, I would love for each of you three, and you don't have to go into in depth, but just kind of like a high level, like how you're leveraging this platform or what you're actually doing on this app so that people that aren't familiar with it have a better understanding. So Jesse, we'll start with you and then we can go Brittany and Leah.
Yeah, I'd love to dive in a little bit. I think there's a lot of different variables that we considered when we were considering, do we look into like ZeeMee or, maybe another alternative. And when I was even considering my college experience, community was really important to me. And yeah, as Soup mentioned earlier, trying to build that community even before getting to campus was really important for our institution here at Grace. And I know it's an important aspect for other people. So we tried the Facebook groups. If any of you guys have experience with Facebook groups, they're really hard to moderate and they're really hard to collect actual data from. And so we kind of moved, and students these days aren't really on Facebook. Maybe their parents are, grandparents, but the students really aren't there. And so then we tried moving over to the TikTok and the Instagram, and we kept on running into those similar instances where we couldn't really moderate control, but also see kind of that organic planning aspect, but also get that data side as well. And so ZeeMee stepped in and they were able to fill in those gaps that I think some of the other social media platforms weren't able to really fill. And so, yeah, there's a lot of conversations. We did consider a few other options, but yeah, seeing the download rates on the App Store, hearing other students talk about it, even before we kind of brought it into our communication planning aspects, was really cool. So ZeeMee was really leading that charge in the marketplace. And so we decided to partner up with them and really, again, fill in those data gaps and being able to, be where students actually are at.
Love it. Brittany.
Yeah. So very similar to you, Jesse, I think we had some gaps, and I would say over the last 5 to 7 years, really the idea of hospitality and sense of belonging has just really risen to the top of our efforts as an admissions team and really across campus as well. And so how do we do that before they ever step foot on this campus? How do we make them feel like they have a sense of community, that they're included, that they have that sense of belonging, which we know the research shows helps keep them here long term. And so we wanted to start really early on. I actually had an admissions counselor on my team who was really an advocate for ZeeMee. He was talking to students on tours, and they were asking, are you guys on ZeeMee? Do you guys have a ZeeMee page account? And so we were able to start really diving into that. And then we were at a conference over the summer, and we chatted with Soup and Tyler and a few others, and we're like, okay, this sounds like something that aligns with what we're trying to do at MBU. And so we really just jumped in this fall. And so we're still really new to ZeeMee, but we've already had a lot of success, and we're starting to really be more intentional of how we roll that out. So whether that be telling all of our students on our tours, hey, if you're not in our ZeeMee community, join now. Having workflows and communication flows that encourages and invites them, but also every time we have a campus event, we're talking about ZeeMee to them, and we're trying to get them to sign up right then and there so they can start to build those relationships, make those connections. Some of them are meeting their roommates through that platform, and they're already excited and talking about how they're going to come to campus. Some of them are grabbing coffee before they ever set foot on campus to make those friends. And when they get here, we've just found that what we're hearing is that they feel like as they're coming, they're more connected than they ever thought they would be. And so we hope that will lead to them staying.
Love it.
Amazing. So the reason kind of for the call today and how we even got connected was we had seen ZeeMee's work of this community element, and the Eligibility Center continues to be interested in how do we help our student athletes coming to the NAI for the first time kind of feel more welcomed. Obviously, it's very transactional. They're trying to get eligible. This is a step they have to do. So a lot of times they're not necessarily thinking about the NAI as kind of a welcome step in the process. They're kind of thinking about it from a transactional level. But what we were trying to do is this broader concept that the NAI is working on with brand awareness and helping student athletes really feel, but like Brittany was saying, a sense of belonging. So we were very interested in what ZeeMee was doing from two perspectives. One was let's leverage it ourselves and see if student athletes could build a community, understand better about the process steps involved. So that's another kind of key element of the Eligibility Center. There's a lot of to-dos. There's a certain sequence. They have a lot of information being thrown at them. We're sending mostly emails. They have to log into an account. And what we know of this process is student athletes generally aren't, that's not the places that they are going organically. They're going to apps, they're going to social media. And so we're pushing a lot of communications, but a lot of it just falls flat and it doesn't necessarily get to the hands of the students when they need it. So we were trying to think of kind of earlier in the funnel. Is there a way for us to get information out to student athletes? And then at the same time, we thought, well, let's leverage this from our call center perspective. Because as we saw some demos, there's ways where student athletes can engage, ask questions. We can pin messages. So that's what we did. We launched the partnership with ZeeMee with the intent for the Eligibility Center to leverage it as a student athlete communication tool. We marketed it to the 40,000 or so student athletes that came through. Again, we're marketing through email communications because that's where we've got students. The irony is we're using email to try to get them into an app and then we can engage with them better. We really didn't know what to expect though. We were inviting students kind of in waves as they were coming into us. So I think in total, we sent about 38,000 invites. We had, by the end of it, I think over 6,000 student athletes actually downloaded the app in the first few months of the partnership, which was incredible. We hit ZeeMee's kind of leaderboard of engagement level. For a while, we were hanging out for a couple of weeks as like the most engaged group, which was very cool to see. I don't think any of us really knew what that meant exactly because we didn't have any baselines. This was really an experimental year for us. We did a lot of posting from our site on one of the channels, if you will, just to let kids know, now it's time to take your test score, put in 9876. Don't forget to, all the different things that they needed to be thinking about eligibility wise. The interesting thing was that we saw on that channel, we also opened it up to let student athlete ask us questions. And this is where it just goes to show you the disconnect between a generation planning and we're the process people. And here we think, oh, they're going to ask us a bunch of questions. So here's what we learned. We got 11 questions, okay? 11. On the other end of the spectrum, our call center, calls and phones and emails, generates 40,000 questions a year. So clearly, ZeeMee is not the place that they're going to go to ask eligibility questions. Got that. Now, what we don't know, though, is we posted these pinned messages. So it's actually possible that we forewent a lot of questions because it was working. So that was an interesting kind of factoid for us at the end of it was we weren't sure whether we were extremely effective or whether it was just not the place that they're going to go. And I mean, any data scientists on the call want to help me explore how the heck I can figure that out, I would love that. But that definitely clearly showed us that wasn't quite what did it. However, that being said, we had 6,000 people in this community learning about NAIA, talking to each other. Where are you going? What are you going to do? Do you have a roommate? And it was the activity was going crazy. And that was on the organic side where the adults have nothing to do with it. We do monitor it. So if there was ever kind of any kind of issue or something like that, we didn't have any champions of character violations or something like that. It was very, very nice. So that taught us, it was interesting. It taught us that the student athletes are craving connection with one another. And that ultimately the eligibility side of it, really the engagement with adults was not what they were there on ZeeMee to do, which makes sense. It's a social media tool that they're leveraging. So that was from our side of it. We are going to continue to explore data. So we want to look at a variety of different things like what percentage of the folks that downloaded ZeeMee ended up converting through payment through the eligibility center all the way through ending up on a campus, and then try to run a comparison of that percentage to the general population and see if we see that the folks who've downloaded and engaged with ZeeMee actually end up on an NAI campus to a greater extent. So there's still some data findings that we're going to be digging into. Again, this is all very new for us. And then we're about to be downloading the second group cohort, which we want to do a little bit earlier in the cycle. That was another thing that we learned was ZeeMee's position is with kids way before the process. Eligibility happens, unfortunately, and we're trying to get ahead of that, but unfortunately much later in the process. So we're actually going to try to invite students as they're coming into the eligibility center, but we still have a bit of a disconnect always, which is kids are coming to the eligibility center generally later than they're trying to engage with you guys on campus from an admissions standpoint. So we may, from an eligibility leveraging standpoint, kind of always be on the back end, but nevertheless, we saw tremendous engagement from those users. So that's kind of on our side of it. We were, generally speaking, I think it exceeded expectations in terms of the thousands that got in there, and a lot more for us still to explore in terms of the impact from what it meant for you guys on campus. The other thing that I just want to highlight is a little bit of the background for us. The reason we were so interested in this partnership with ZeeMee was the ability for student athletes to find NAI schools. So the other thing that's happening is, Soup talked about it, but there's 2 million, did you say something like that? Plus 2 million plus users on ZeeMee already. So some of the people we were inviting were already on the tool. They were just now registered for Play NAI and now got invited to an NAI community. Number two, there were some of them who maybe actually were already kind of on the app and looking at different schools, who then now, because there's an NAI community, have the opportunity to opt into that. So we also were trying to broaden just the general ability for student athletes to learn about the opportunities in the NAI. So that was super important to us as well. And then the more schools, an NAI member who engages and creates a community on ZeeMee, it starts to broaden and broaden and broaden, because what the other thing we saw was students are typically involved in 5 to 7 communities. So they're exploring. That's the kind of user that we have, is the folks who are interested in going to college and they're looking at where to go. So the more NAI schools that are on the community, the more opportunity they have to discover basically what schools are out there. So that's a little bit about the NAI's engagement with it. Happy to talk about questions here, and pass the mic back to you, Soup.
Thank you, Leah. I appreciate it. One of the things that you said that really resonates with me, that I see with all of the colleges and universities that are leveraging this platform, we tend to be so good at transactional information relay in the way we communicate to prospective students, the way we can communicate with our prospective student athletes. And I think what we've discovered is, yes, we need to do all that logistical work. We need to get these students and these student athletes through the process that they're going to go through, but they're also just craving just relationship. They're also just craving, like, this is cool that Leah hangs out in here. And like, if we did like have something like, we could engage with Leah, or we could just learn more about connecting with each other, making new friendships. So that's a big part of this. So Leah, I appreciate you kind of going in depth and sharing some of that. So, all right, let's dive into some of these topics today. Enough about the ZeeMee stuff. Let's just talk more high level athletes, non-athletes, building community. The first topic I want to kind of explore, again, the difference between how student athletes are recruited versus non-athletes. Now, I'm just going to real quick. In a previous life, I was working at a state university here in Indiana where I'm located. I was an entry-level admission counselor after transitioning from being a high school teacher and head varsity baseball coach for several years. And all of a sudden, I'm in this admissions thing. And there's one thing I was really good at, and I think that was just recruiting students. And so I'm working in this admissions office. I don't even know what's going on yet. And a coach, one of the athletic coaches, happened to bring a prospective student athlete into the admissions office with that student's mom. And basically looks like it was just going to be this quick little, like, we need to grab a folder and we're on. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I'd love to just like sit down and chat and learn more about long story short, and the coach was kind of like giving me weird looks, but long story short, that student athlete committed there in my office before the student like left. And I'm looking at this coach, and this coach looks like the coach is in shock. Like, what is happening here? I don't really know what's happening. Subsequently, after that, in my office every week is athletic gear from different coaches. All of a sudden, every coach wants to bring their prospective athletes by. But what I learned was that wasn't normal. And at that institution, things were very separate. You know, athletics did their thing, admissions did their thing. They very rarely kind of crossed paths. And so it was just really interesting. It showed me, wow, there is a very different process. So I want to explore that a little bit. Jesse, I want to start with you with this first question. Now, Jesse, I know you're going to tell every one of us that you have very little athletic background in your personal life, but just share with all of us what it's like for you, kind of in your current role as director of admissions, when you engage and have interactions with prospective athletes. Is there a different process you're doing with them than you would do with any of the non-athletes? What does that look like at your school today?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, unfortunately, I hung up the towel for playing sports in about eighth grade. So haven't been on a court, haven't been on a field for some time. But yeah, it definitely, like you mentioned, the coaches kind of oversee the recruitment for the coaches on the call. You probably are really involved in that conversation, in that process. I think for non-athletes, you're not there, right? And so we're talking more with parents and more directly with the student. And so our office is here to hopefully bridge that gap. I'm really proud to say that we do have a really good relationship and partnership with our athletic departments. I know it's not like that on every campus, but really being able to bridge that gap and kind of fill in some of that information that maybe the coaches or the current student athletes can't really fill. And we really walk through more of the logistical aspect with our student athletes and really kind of connect with the parents as well. I feel like the coaches are connecting really well with the student, but then the parents kind of get tossed aside. But they definitely have a lot of questions and they have concerns, and I think coaches address some of those. But kind of on the general admissions side, our counselors, our student ambassadors are maybe able to fill in that gap. So again, bridging that partnership is really what my role and our team really does when it comes to student athletes compared to maybe non-athletes.
I love that. I just think like, one of the previous institutions I worked for, right? And many of you watching today, maybe this is a similar experience, but I've worked at one of those schools. 70% of our incoming class were student athletes, right? And so there's very unique dynamics. This varies from school to school. So I think it's always important. Again, I still think things work better for everyone. The more collaboration, the more we can communicate, the more we can be on the same page. I wanted to support every one of my coaches. I wanted them to win because if they're winning and they're getting their athletes in, like that's helping me in the admission side. So I think that collaboration is important. Brittany, I want to go to you to maybe kick us off with this one, just to kind of explore this one a little bit. But I've been thinking a lot more around beyond academics, are there other things like programs or initiatives that we can leverage to like attract, non-athletes to the institution or athletes to the institution, right? Like, is it only we're just recruiting this prospective student athlete? The only reason you should be interested in our school is this athletic program? Or are there other things beyond just the major, the academic study, that we can use to leverage to really include these students in? One thing I know I didn't really plan to talk about, but I don't know, Brittany or Jesse, if you all have this, but like esports has like blown up in popularity in recent years. I don't know if you all offer that, but like that's something I feel like is another way that we can bring in community. But Brittany, just anything around that area that you could discuss that's happening at your institution?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we do have esports. I'm not an expert on that, so can't say too much other than it is something that we're seeing more and more interest in. It's more and more of an attractive kind of opportunity for maybe students who that's really their passion, and I mean, these folks, they compete like big time in esports. So it definitely, they're really committed. And so it's nice to have the opportunity to have something for those students as well. At MBU, so Missouri Baptist University is an unapologetically Christian institution. And so that's really threaded into everything that we do and every piece of our enrollment strategy. And so we really are focused on recruiting mission fit students, whether that be an athlete or a non-athlete. So who is going to align well with who we are, be a part of our community, appreciate our values, and just really lean into that and do well here. Because, I mean, we talked about this a little earlier, but Vincent Tinto, many of you probably know who that is. He was a theorist in higher ed. Student departure theory says that students who feel a sense of belonging and who feel like they fit in, they're going to stay, they're going to retain, they're going to do well. And so that really has kind of lended itself into how we've kind of how we've kind of put together our enrollment management strategy over the last few years, specifically the last 5 years or so. And so what does that look like, right? So what are those things that are designed to attract those mission fit students, whether it be an athlete or a non-athlete? And so it starts with the events, right? As we're putting together events, we want students to come in. We want them to know who we are. We want them to feel like they're part of the community and welcomed. But then on the other side of that, it's a lot of programming that we're hoping attracts students, prospective students, to say, hey, that's the institution for me. I belong there. And so maybe that's, we have a newly redesigned honors program for students who are really committed to their academics. They can get a scholarship to be an honor student, but there's a lot of programming behind that that creates its own sense of community among those students. Maybe it is, we recently partnered with Joy FM. They're a large Christian radio station to offer a scholarship called the Excellence in Service Scholarship. So the month of October and November was spent with that radio station talking about how we are trying to find students who want to receive a full tuition scholarship and are committed to service in their community. So that's very different than what we've done in the past. A lot of our scholarships are either focused on, hey, you're getting a scholarship for being a student athlete, or you're getting a scholarship based on merit. And we really kind of turned that upside down this year. And we said, okay, our student athletes are scholars too. And so we look at the whole person, we look at them holistically. So they're getting a merit and an athletic scholarship. Whereas our non-athletes, they're open to merit scholarships, as well as, you know, a host of other scholarships that all of our students can apply to, regardless of their classification. And so that Excellence in Service Scholarship was just looking at for another layer of a type of student, right? Students who are doing a lot of service, they're committed to their community. And then also, I would say we have a lot of programming once they get to campus that we try to tell them about up front, whether that be our ambassadors who are in the app and ZeeMee and who are talking to students, telling them about kind of like a day in the life, right? So we have a lot of spiritual life activities and events that for students who, we have a student-led worship group. So students who want to go to worship one night a week can do that, or I think it's twice a month, can do that through that. And they really lead it themselves. So we have a lot of ministry majors that'll kind of get together in that community and move forward with that. We have a lot of mission trips and a lot of study abroad opportunities. And so we're telling them about that up front. Like, these are the students who want to give back and they want to be stretched. And so we try to get those students together very early on in their experience to say, like, hey, there's a place for you. And these are all the amazing things that you can do if you come to MBU, if that's the right fit for you. And helping them explore what that fit looks like is really important, because the truth is, we have to create value on the front end, and we have to create like a sense of belonging on the front end. But once they get here, that has to be their experience. We can't just talk about it and tell them how great it's going to be, and then they get here and they don't have that experience. So it's not just kind of showcasing that in our community and putting together different channels and letting them connect in that way. But then it's also following through with that through our programming. And so I think that answers your question. It's a lot of layers, and we're always looking at what's the next thing. How can we add to it? What can we do next?
I love that. Great response. Now, I promised myself before this webinar, I was not going to mention any other national athletic organizations. I'm not going to, but I want to say, like, one of the things I feel like I've experienced over the years with the NAIA is that we still have student athletes. Like, we actually do still have, yes, we're recruiting athletes, but they're fully a part of everything else that goes on our campuses. And that's what I love a lot. I'm going to give you coaches that are tuning in today a big shout out right now. Over the past 3 years, I've been working with one of my colleagues. Her name is Dr. Raquel Bermejo. She's with a company called RNL in the higher ed space. We've been doing some really interesting research around primarily high school seniors, their emotions, their feelings, like as they go through the process of transitioning from high school to college. I want to give you coaches a shout out because one of the things that we found in our research, there is one specific demographic of incoming college student that actually has a decently less kind of level of like stress and anxiety through this entire process, and they're student athletes. And what that tells me is you coaches, the way you recruit your individual student athletes, you give them a level of attention and support that maybe not all other non-athletes maybe always experience. The non-athlete just going through the regular admissions process. So for this next question, and really this could be Jesse or Brittany, with you two kind of being on the college side, what can we do to make sure non-athletes feel that level of connection and support, as they go through the admissions process that we know our prospective student athletes get from our coaches? And maybe Jesse, you could kick us off.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point. Yeah, the coaches are very intentional and do a really good job. And yeah, we thank the coaches for, your dedication to connecting individually with us. And I think it's specifically my team, we do have a lot to learn from coaches and how you interact and how you engage with students, and how we can even learn from what you bring to the table. I think when we kind of think about as non-athletes, how can we do that? I think it's that sense of before they get to campus, and I think ZeeMee again helps create that that space for them to be able to have that sense of belonging, that sense of community prior to stepping on campus. And so for the non-athletes, I think it takes a lot of intentionality from our student ambassadors, our tour guides, our admissions team, to really push them into that space where they can build that community, hopefully, and maybe even continue the conversations from what they're having here on campus.
It's good stuff. Good stuff. All right, we got to move. I always have so many questions, and there's never enough time for all the questions I want to ask. Okay, so let's move into another topic. I want to talk about just this change we've seen over the past, 10, 15 years here, just the rise of social media, digital communities, like the way these young people communicate today really has changed the game on all levels of how we engage and communicate with students. I know when I went off to Indiana University in the fall of 1994, literally my parents kicked me out of that car the day before classes started. And it was like you had a 30-minute convocation, go meet your academic advisor, go find your dorm. That's where you'll meet your roommate. And you were lucky if you made some friends by the end of first semester. We know that's not how it works today. All of these students expect to arrive on campus connected, friendships, bonds. So, Leah, I want to circle back to you for a second. And I don't know if you've got anything on hand, but like, if you've got anything in front of you there, like a little more background on just like any data, any numbers just around the engagement you've noticed with prospective student athletes in that community that you mentioned. You all have your community on the app. Like, are there any concrete numbers that you've got that you could just kind of share that kind of just shows that level of engagement you've had with these students in community long before they're planning to arrive on a college campus?
Yeah, it was interesting. So one thing that we saw, and again, this is kind of, I think, because of the uniqueness of our cohort, we saw incredible engagement for probably the first 4 weeks. And then after that point, the community almost just completely took which makes sense. It took a complete dive because then at that point they were probably already in your communities specific to the NAI school. So they really, it was hot and heavy in the front end and then just went completely silent. So it'll be interesting to see if we see that again. But we saw hundreds and hundreds of up to thousands of engagements. So it was, and student athletes in ZeeMee can connect with each other. They can connect together. So there was a lot of just activity. Again, none of it adult initiated. We would throw in some things here and there about just who the NAI is and kind of sprinkling in some branding things to try to leverage the opportunity that we had with all of this. It looks a lot like a LinkedIn kind of approach as people are engaging. But it was incredible. But the types of engagements were really interesting. Sometimes people were trying to find roommates, and sometimes people were asking about what extracurriculars are you going to do at this? Anybody also interested in engineering? So it was really interesting. It was like nursing students trying to find each other, different sport people, trying to meet up. So it was pretty cool. I don't know. It was all over the map. I'm not sure, Soup.
Well, and I think what that shows is like that shows our prospective student athletes actually do care about other things. They do. Yes, they're athletes. Yes, that's going to be a big part of their collegiate experience. But that's not only who they are. They also care about a lot of these other things, and they care about like these academic majors or these programs, or like who else like also loves computer gaming, because I do that all the time too. And so yeah, I just think that's a great reminder to us, like to our coaches, to know like, hey, you want to hook some of these students, like know that there's some other hooks because they've got a lot of these other interests that if you show that you're into those things as well, that prospective athlete's ears might perk up a little bit and like, well, wait a minute, let me hear a little bit more about, you and this school and your program. You're one of the only coaches talking about this kind of stuff. So yeah, keep that in mind. That's good feedback, Leah. Thank you. All right, let's do another question here. Let's see. So this could be from any of you, can just choose to jump in on this one, but we've already touched on this a little bit, but again, what role does fostering a sense of community play in your recruitment efforts? So it's maybe more Brittany and Jesse kicking us off here, but what role do you feel like fostering that sense of community really plays in your current recruitment efforts? I'll allow either one of you to jump in.
Yeah, I would say it is the absolute central thing for us at MBU. Whether that, and our coaches do this so well, actually. They are kind of a role model in terms of how they create that on the front end with students, with their student athletes. They've really led in us showing our admissions counselors, and our admissions counselors are great at this too, but how to do that really well, building those connections early on, connecting other athletes together and connecting other students together. A lot of times our admissions counselors will tell, hey, actually, you're looking for a roommate and you're really nervous about this. I have this other student that you should really get to know. You both are interested in, playing pickleball or X, Y, and Z, whatever it may be, right? And so we try to connect them on the front end. So I would say we're always thinking about that. On the individual level, right? Like how do we pair students together and get them connected? But also on the bigger level through things like ZeeMee and events, hosting mixers or things like that, where we can kind of pair them off together and create that community.
That's great. Jesse, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I think for us, it really helps break down those barriers of awkwardness. I don't know if any of you have tried doing like icebreakers in person or even virtually, and they're just sometimes they're fun, sometimes they're not fun. And so when you kind of put it in those students' hands to kind of break that down in an organic environment, that's really what has really helped us be able to leverage ZeeMee. So once they get to campus, we've already had those icebreakers, we've already had those awkward conversations already done. And so then we can really start diving into that relationship building aspect, which then, the roommate, the where are you living, what are you studying, like those are just going to be continuing conversations from the community.
Love it. Jesse, I want to stay with you. So I want to see if you've got an example of this. If not, we'll see if Brittany can jump in with a possible example. But either of you have any actual like success stories? Like you get an actual example of where the impact of this community stuff, this community engagement, like directly influenced a student's decision to roll, a prospective student athlete to commit. Are there any like actual concrete examples like you could share where you've seen this kind of manifest itself?
Yeah, that's funny you asked because just last Friday we had a all-campus event for prospective students, committed students, and at the end of the day we have what we call an academic fair so they can meet with professors and coaches. And we had two students come up to the admissions table and we were just chatting with them and we were like, hey, how did you guys hear about Grace? Where are you guys kind of at in your college process? And they're like, we're already committed. We're going to be roommates. And we're like, oh my goodness, where did you guys meet? And they're like, we met on ZeeMee. And so it was like through that roommate pairing channel that they were like, yeah. And this was their first time actually being on campus individually, but they got to experience that first time experience as a roommate pair. So yeah, even just last Friday, students are talking, students are having those conversations, athletes and now non-athletes.
That's so cool. Brittany, I'll give you a chance. Anything come to mind, like an actual example that you?
Yeah. Sorry, I feel like I'm gonna be like saying the same thing as Jesse. And you're gonna be like, that's not real because you're repeating it. But actually, this a very similar thing just happened. We had two students who came for a preview day and connected, and then they ended up connecting again on the ZeeMee app and started chatting. And now they're both committed and they're both going to be roommates or hoping to be roommates in the fall. So they're really excited about that.
That's super cool. I never get bored of hearing those stories. It just, again, like that's what I'm passionate about, helping these students find connection, find belonging. And again, that starts long before they arrive on campus. All right, let's get to our last topic. We're moving right along. We're doing great here. I want to spend a little time and talk about kind of this rise of peer-to-peer engagement. This is nothing new, right? Like we know how influential current college students, current college student athletes can be in influencing those future students that we're trying to recruit or those future student athletes. We know current student athletes will host prospective athletes when they're on visits and those things. So like we know this is really important. I would assume today coaches as well as admissions officers are actively leveraging all of these current students. So I want to take a few minutes and explore what it looks like today, examine any opportunities maybe we're missing or things that we could be doing. Leah, I want to go back. I want to come back over to you. I am curious, since we've got you on the webinar today, I'm actually really curious to even learn more about how specifically the NAIA might be working directly with any current student athletes. Are you all as an athletic organization leveraging some current student athletes, in ways to engage or promote or enhance our brand to get more students interested in the NAIA? I want you to jump in first on that one.
Yeah, beautiful. So this is actually a strategic pillar for our strategic plan for this cycle. We heard loud and clear from our members exactly this, that when they're going out and recruiting, the brand of the NAIA is a lot of times just unknown, right? We're not on ESPN. The kids aren't just hearing about it through their blood of being an American kid growing up, right? So we have a lot of work to do on that front of it. And on the flip side, we have incredible brand affinity with folks who are in a living, breathing, feeling the experience of being an NAI student athlete. So we have this major gap that is creating a great opportunity for us. And so we're working hard this strategic plan to leverage ways that we can close that gap. So we're working now with an outside marketing company who's helping us create, and we're going to be launching. So very cool. Everyone on this call is kind of getting a little bit of a preview of that. But at convention, we're going to be launching some really cool tools that we're going to put together that's going to equip our members with telling the NAI story. We've got a brand kind of campaign, if you will, a tagline that's going to kind of help us generate buzz. And then we're going to put tangible things in the hands of our members so that they can then send this out, activate on social media, and help kind of really create an organic kind of NAI branding type of thing. as we look at it, we know for sure that student athletes are the target ultimately. We have the most connection with our members, who then have the most connection with the student athletes. So we're focused on how do we equip our members to help them do the job that they need to do. At the same time, we have a massive opportunity with student athletes coming through the Eligibility Center. So we're working on creating kind of brand toolkits, if you will, and we've just completed a process to look at our Eligibility Center through a Welcome Center lens to find ways that we can put brand messaging information sprinkled throughout their eligibility process, and then have a welcome kit, if you will, that gets in their hands. Our missing link is an app, because we leverage emails and phones and texting. That's the only stuff that we've got. So we know that, and we're looking at this idea of we obviously, like, ZeeMee is the perfect breeding ground to show us what happens when you meet students where they are. So we're trying to sort through that from our standpoint. We also do stuff through our ASAs, which is our leadership groups that students engage. But that's kind of a smaller group. They're the leaders. They get appointed through a conference, right? What we're trying to make a broader impact than just the creme de la creme, the student athletes that really get to come to convention. And we hear that actually. This last convention, the student athletes that were there, which by the way is an amazing thing that we do, that we have them living and breathing it and there with us. But they were like, if we need to package this was the most incredible experience of a lifetime. Like, if there was a way that every student athlete could get to feel like what it's like to be, all the people behind the scenes orchestrating this whole thing. Like, so that's kind of what we're trying a little bit to bring to life. And I'm going to be working probably in the next 18 months around how do we leverage an app. And so I think it's a beautiful thing, this partnership that we've got with you, ZeeMee, because you're doing kind of one piece of it, which is on the front end. And that's kind of what we wanted to do, was start to dabble and explore what are the possibilities when we meet students where they're at. So we're really at the tip of the iceberg, I would say, Soup. And we recognize there's a big opportunity here. And we are going to be asking our members to help us make this campaign really come to life. So it's going to be a fun thing to see.
All right, you need to settle down a little bit, because you're getting me hyped up, just like sharing all this. Like, yeah, I'm like, let's go. Like, let's get these student athletes more plugged in. So I love it. Like, all of those ideas. And Leah, I don't have to tell you this, but like anything that we can do on the ZeeMee side, like just supporting you guys or brainstorming these things, to help you all kind of push some of these initiatives forward, we always want to be a part of that. That's super exciting. Okay, let's do a couple more questions. We're getting into our last 10 minutes here. We'll go back over more to Brittany or Jesse for this one. In your current offices right now, do you all have kind of within just the admissions office, are you leveraging any current athletes in your office as tour guides or as student ambassadors? Are they playing a role within your office now, not only recruiting athletes, but just a part of that regular admissions process, also recruiting other prospective students? And so I'll go Brittany first, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, great question. So yes, we have ambassadors who are also student athletes, who are giving tours, who are meeting with students, who are talking with prospective families. And we try to be intentional too. If we know a student is wanting to, maybe a prospective student is wanting to play a certain sport, and we have an ambassador who plays that sport, like connecting them together. And our coaches also just do a great job at like being a part of that experience and leading out on that experience and connecting them to also other current athletes, so they can build that community from day one when they start looking at us. But we also want to do that on the admissions side. So we want to have those folks embedded within our admissions team. We also have a lot of admissions counselors who are former athletes, either at our institution or another institution. And so we can really speak to all sides of the house. But it is about communication and working with those coaches, because they're the expert in their area, right? And they know what these students are looking for. And so we try to open those lines of communication, and just kind of have really holistically serve our students through our tours, both with an ambassador, an admissions counselor, and a coach, and current athletes as well.
Yep, love that. And Jesse, I'm assuming literally I'm going to throw it to you, but I bet you've got the exact same examples that you all have as well. But yeah, share what that looks like kind of within your admissions office with any of those student athletes serving in ambassador roles or tour guides.
Yeah, very similar vein, very similar. We want students to get connected in their areas of interest, whether that's academics, whether that's, athletics. One thing that came to mind as I was thinking and listening is that kind of an organic way that a lot of our student athletes and non-student athletes intersect is within the classroom. And so we want our students to visit. We want them to be able to experience what a classroom is going to be like here at Grace, and very similar to, I think, other coaches and people on the call. But utilizing kind of that classroom and making sure that athletes are aware, that non-athletes are visiting, and it's still a great way to be able to leverage both sides of the table for the same purpose.
Yeah, that's super. That's good. I love it. And you both work at such great institutions that, like, again, when you think about trying to create the college, the athlete, like the experience, you two are very fortunate. You're at schools. I mean, I think that's the vast majority of our NAIA schools reflect that, which is really special, especially in today's age where things have really, really changed in college athletics at some levels. And, sometimes we feel like we're losing that aspect of just student athletes. But, I think about the students I've had in the past, like so many of these student athletes, they're leaders. Like there's things they've learned of being a part of a sport their entire life. There's great qualities and characteristics of just discipline, commitment, grit. And like there's all these things like these student athletes just are they're wired and they've experienced this year after year, and they tend to make great leaders. And so like if you're tuning in today and you're more on that administrative side or just admissions, and none of your tour guides or ambassadors reflect that athletic side of thing, you're missing something. You're missing something by bringing those student athletes in and leveraging them because they can do great work for you. Okay, last question, and this one's got to be just rapid fire. And we've already kind of touched on it, so maybe I'll just tweak this question a little bit, make you panelists think. This one wasn't in our script, so you don't know this one. Let's do this, and I'll give you a second to think. What's just one thing you would say? Like, again, you got the platform here. So I think Jesse, Brittany, representing the college side, what might be one thing you would say to coaches out there right now that's like, this is what we need, or this is what we desire, this is how, we want to collaborate. What's kind of something you would kind of say to coaches that you would want coaches to kind of know, or kind of see things through the lens you see things, or kind of some parting wisdom or anything? Like, what's something you could share there to any of our coaches that are tuning in today? And I won't call on you, but whenever you're ready, when one of you's ready to maybe jump in with something, just go ahead. I put them on the spot with this one.
I think I can jump in here.
Yeah.
So I would say just first and foremost, like you hold so much value, and we could not do this work without you. And so I know I've been at institutions before where it's very siloed. And so what I found is that just doesn't work. That doesn't work what's best for the student. And so really, like, our heart from an admissions perspective is to come alongside you and serve those students well, but allow you to lead out as being the expert in your area, because you truly are. And so it's just, I think we want to partner. We're eager to partner, and we appreciate all you all do. And we appreciate you all always kind of extending that partnership to us. Our coaches at NBU have just been so gracious as we've really redesigned and restructured a lot of things. And so we're just so appreciative of that.
Love it.
Yeah.
Jesse, what do you got?
Yeah, very similar. We want to partner with you, and we're here as a resource for you as you go through. You guys have your focus within your specific sport, and we're here to hopefully kind of fill in those gaps when it comes to what the enrollment process, what next steps look like. And so, yeah, our phone lines are open for students, but also for our coaches. So if there's ever a student, you're like, where's this student at in the enrollment process? What does this student need to do next to meet eligibility or to continue the process here at Grace? or at your institution, our phones are open as well. And so we want to be able to be that resource for you as well. So reach out. We will hopefully, as an admissions staff, hopefully want to reach out to you and keep that partnership thriving.
Okay, you didn't, Soup, this is an interesting one, but I want to throw in one thing.
Yes, I wasn't going to leave you off the hook. I was literally going to
Oh,
go
no.
to you. So yes, jump in.
One thing I would say is I'm going to flip it and I'm going to say to the admissions folks on the line to do the same thing, that they're, from our standpoint, I mean, I'm only in the athletics world, but I see so much of how good our coaches are at recruiting. And I would say to the admissions folks, like, let's learn from each other. And if you can find ways of replicating what the coaches are doing, of course, you can't replicate creating a golf team, but if you can find the things that they're doing so well to create community, then do that, because it's incredible the hook that, like, the research that R&L did together to collaborate that showed that student athletes are coming with less stress, which is actually quite shocking when you really think about it. But I mean, my standpoint of also overseeing eligibility and the different processes they have to do, I'm quite happy to hear that, quite frankly. But it's got to be because of the relationship that they have, someone there to help hold their hand. So they feel that they're connected to somebody. So anyway, that would be my one plug, is let's find the ways to replicate what the coaches are doing on the non-athletic side as well.
I agree 100%. And I'll even say I did a webinar. This has been maybe a little over a year ago. I actually had two coaches and another colleague in higher ed that also is a former collegiate coach. That was our entire webinar. If you're ever curious, like, reach out to me after this. I'll get a link to you. That conversation was incredible, but that is exactly what we talked about. What are the unique things coaches are doing that we don't know, like us admission counselors can learn from and adopt and adapt? So I want to do this in our final minute. I want to make sure if any of you watching today want to connect and follow up with us panelists, Leah, Brittany, just drop in the chat how people could connect with you, whether it's your LinkedIn or email. Like, I know folks may have follow-up questions, want to make sure people can get connected with you. I'll put mine in there quickly as well. Just soup@zeemee.com is my email. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn person. So find me on LinkedIn. But as we wrap up, just want to thank everyone so much for sharing your knowledge, especially you three panelists. This was really, really cool. A really interesting, valuable conversation. Special shout out to the NAIA. You all know I love you guys so much. You're incredible. All the work that you're doing for our student athletes. Love that you all are trailblazers, the first athletic organization to like get on this ZeeMee thing. They're like, what is this? We're gonna like take a chance here. So appreciate you guys doing that. Thanks for allowing us to team up together on today's webinar. And again, appreciate you guys. I think Matt might close us out, but we are right at the top of the hour.
Yeah, I echo everything here. This is great, valuable content, feedback, information. Thank you, Sue, Leah, Brittany, Jesse. That was excellent. So yeah, they have all their information here. We can kind of send out kind of a post webinar communication as well, so you can always connect with them and better understand what they're doing. So thank you again for joining us today. If you have any questions, you just let us know. Take care.